Teachers of Reddit, what is the most awful parent you ever had to deal with at a parent-teacher conference? The worst was a mother who threatened to pull her daughter out of the school system if she wasn't given the lead soprano role in the high school's Christmas concert. Her daughter had auditioned, like everyone else, but didn't have either the voice or skills required for the part. The student understood this and agreed with the decision. It was her mother that turned it into a confrontation, believing her daughter to be an opera star in the making. 5th grader with a ton of potential and an awesome personality. He was one of my favorite students, but chronically unprepared and always behind on homework. Mom comes in for conference and makes excuses for him, blames me for giving confusing assignments, not accurate, and tells me how she can't help manage his HW because she has 2 other kids to worry about. For example, grandma picks up kids and drops them at brother's baseball practice. My student leaves backpack in grandma's car. Mom picks up kids after practice. Her conclusion was, why should brother miss out on baseball because he has siblings? After about 5 minutes of this, I stopped her and turned to the kid. I asked him if he thought he could be doing more, even if it's on his own, and he said that he could. I told him I thought so, too, and thanked them for coming in. Next day at school, I told him that I thought he was a great person who had a ton of potential and that he was going to have to make things happen for himself. He totally understood what I meant. It broke my heart. I was an art teacher at a conservative Christian high school and once had a parent tell me I should act and dress less young because she suspected her son had indecent thoughts about me. Being 21 and in my first year of full-time teaching after uni, I was really taken aback by her critique and asked her if she could explain herself a bit better. She then suggested I'd try cutting my hair in a more modest model and dye it darker. I'm a natural blonde. There was a pretty conservative dress code in place for teachers, but according to her, someone like me should exaggerate that a bit more to hide my shame. She then looked me up and down and sighed. To be honest, I don't think they should hire females under 30. Anyway, it's just too much of a risk. By the way, her kid was 15. He probably had indecent thoughts about water kettles too. As I understand it, a boy that age can be turned on by a strong enough gust of wind. There was a mom who insisted that I was being biased towards her kid. She brought up a recent essay as an example and complained about the grade her kid received on it. I had given the essay a C and the mom was saying that it was obviously an A essay. I assured her that I was not biased and pointed out numerous issues with the essay that prevented it from scoring higher. It had content-related issues as well as numerous basic grammatical errors. The mom then revealed that she had written the essay, not her kid. She said, "So it looks like you've got some explaining to do," and then sat back with a smug grin on her face. Yeah, it's me who's got the explaining to do. I've told this story before, but we had a mom who threatened to do to our principal what you see on CSI, automatic restraining order. Wasn't at a parent-teacher conference, but I tutored the child of a very aggressive parent who was so sure that their child was going to get into the #1 high school in the state and would not let anyone tell them otherwise. The mother confronted me because I was taking about 2 lessons to go through past papers. That was because he was getting everything wrong, so I needed to explain almost every question. His ability level wasn't nearly close, and the poor child was under so much pressure from his overbearing parents. I never heard from them again. It's amazing how many parents think they can teach teachers how to teach. My dad has this tendency to complain that my teachers were crap and he was gonna go complain to them personally. My teachers were fine. I just have dyslexia and my parents never gave a crap enough to get me diagnosed during high school. A good thing he never gave a crap enough to remember my teachers' names. The one who told me the reason I was a bad teacher was because I wasn't a mom. No fertility issues, but what if, but had just gone through a terrible breakup of a relationship heading toward marriage and family. Not really what a 35-year-old woman wants to hear from the mother of an emotionally disturbed child. More like an emotionally disturbed mother. Not me, but wife is a kindergarten teacher and suspected that one of her students may be autistic. The kid couldn't communicate well at all, had issues with using the bathroom, and showed other classic signs of autism. My wife had a conference with the mother and explained that she would like him to be evaluated, but the mother refused and said that if her son did have autism, my wife was the one who caused it. Oh man. I was working at a boarding school on their summer school course. We had 2 boys, 8 and 11, arrive with their uncle who they were staying with. The boys were from the UAE. He'd come to drop them off for 5 weeks but neglected to tell the children. They thought they'd come for a nice castle tour. Uncle books it and leaves it to us to explain that they were staying for 5 weeks. Rather than having an awesome holiday, they'd been doing some really cool things for the week prior to being dropped off. During the kids' stay, the uncle would take the boys off campus to go to the mosque and bring them back on Saturday afternoon. One week they came back with games consoles which they weren't allowed. Uncle tried to bribe me to let them keep them by offering me a white chihuahua puppy, and when I declined he shouted at me for being common and poor. During the boys' last week, several trunks full of clothes and belongings arrived because, surprise, the kids were going to be staying at the school until they were 18. Best parents ever. One of the parents in my daughter's class had their conference right before mine. I was sitting in the hall and could hear them trying to rebut everything the teacher said. Then these suckers brought in the mom's sister, who is a teacher, and she got in on it with her expert opinion. Their kid was a butthole, by the way. He stabbed my kid with the scissors and was known as the class bully. Not one kid in particular, but every year there are 1 or 2 aggressive or disrespectful students. 90% of the time, the parents try to make excuses about how this is normal, how all kids are like this at that age, and how I should show them more compassion instead of owning up that there is a discipline problem. Those same 90% of parents are also usually disrespectful and verbally aggressive to teachers, and everyone dreads talking to them. That saying about the apple not falling far from the tree rings oh so true. Alternatively, the parents who are the most apologetic and a delight to talk to are the ones with fantastic children. "Sorry if my kid was not focused," is a line I get too often. Are you kidding, mom? I would adopt this child if I could. I had a preschool aged student who would fixate on his female classmates. He would single one out and follow her around, then hug her and try to give her kisses. These were 3-4-year-olds, and they would hate that. So inevitably the girl would try to squirm away, and he'd get angry and start hitting and scratching her face. He'd get in trouble, of course, but the following week he'd have a new target. His mom was horrified and would try to keep him corralled, but he really didn't respect her at all. The only people he'd actually listen to were the dads that attended the program with their kids. They were pretty sympathetic, since they could see the kid had issues and knew we were trying to get him into our agency's free counseling program. Well, his attitude toward females became obvious once his dad came back from deployment. When my supervisor and I met with him, he was proud of what his boy was doing. He said it showed that he knew what he wanted and his determination to get it, and he's not taking any crap from the girls. Really ugly stuff. He literally said that the girls should just let him give them a kiss, since he'd get mad if he couldn't. The mom just kept her head down. Right then I understood why she wanted counseling from us, rather than using his military benefits. He was by far the most misogynistic jerk I have ever met, and his son was picking it up from him. Not a week later, the kid tried to go after the daughter of another Marine. Said Marine was present. Said Marine shouted at the dad for a while, and said he'd be speaking to his company. I ended up leaving the program a few days later, but I've always hoped the mom and little boy got away from him, and that the boy got some therapy. Otherwise, I have no doubt I'll be seeing him on the news in a few years. That is terrifying. I had a parent come in a week before school ended and tell me their child had the worst year ever and demanded to know what I was going to do to change it. Well, we could repeat it if you think that'd help. I was teaching calculus for seniors in high school. It was for AP credit, and the kids that were in there were a year or 2 ahead of the average student. A mother came in and told me her daughter was wasting her time in my class because she wasn't smart enough to go to college and would end up just running the family bookstore anyway and not doing anything with her life. The girl was smart, self-motivated, and was already doing college level work and getting A's. I pulled her aside the next day and told her how to look into scholarships if her parents weren't planning on helping pay for college. I'm proud to say she went. You're an amazing teacher. That's great she got to go on to college without her crappy parents bringing her down. I teach K-12 music at a smaller rural school. Musicals are always hard with a small student body and rehearsals conflicting with sports. Students sign a contract in December with one condition, that they attend the last 3 rehearsals before the show in its entirety. Even coaches agreed with us 3 missed practices is fine. 8th grade girl gets asked to try out for varsity softball and tells us that week that she is not coming at the last 3 rehearsals but will be in the show. We say sorry, that is not acceptable. This student we had worked with and accommodated for 3 months, making she got to go to all her basketball practices and could full participate in both, so yeah, we were not very happy she was saying this. We work out with the student that she will come for 95% of the time, only missing the last scene which she was just a body on set with no lines, and then she can still make most of her practices. But we will not allow her in scenes she misses, and the student agreed and said it was no big deal. All seemed fine. Cue angry mother. Demanded a phone call that day. It was 3 PM when we got her email. First sentence was, well, she didn't know when she signed she would be asked to try out, so she shouldn't be held to her contract, which obviously we said is not how contracts work. Then she turned to rage mode, started screaming insults at us, trashing my profession, made numerous comments on how no one gives a crap about music, so why don't we just frick off. Accused us of things that were not true, from threatening students to showing favoritism to giving ultimatums, and then she gave us an ultimatum saying either we let her miss and be in every scene or she is pulling her out. Finally my co-worker got a word in and cut the conversation off, saying an admin will contact her tomorrow. This was 6 PM after rehearsal. The coach talked down the mom, saying it was fine that she go to us first and she will still get to be on varsity, but I never want to see that parent again. After our very successful show she was all over Facebook saying how wonderful it was and how lucky the kids are to get to participate. We just shook our heads at her. I hate how sports are always more important than music. Always. Look, if you want to do one and not the other, great. But don't try to do both and expect music to just take a backseat, but you still want to be the star. I had a student, 11th grade, throw scissors at me because he heard someone call me mean. His mom tried to tell me that he gets really upset when men disrespect women. Meanwhile, he told me he could have really done damage if he wanted to. The sad thing, I had only asked him to complete his journal entry for the day. The scissors were then locked up every day. It still blows my mind, and I actually laugh to this day about the incident. A guy came to school livid about his kid's performance. He shouted, insulted, and blamed everyone except his kid himself. The twist is, his kid doesn't go to this school. He actually did not know what school his kid went to. No, he is not divorced. Yes, he lives with his family in the same household. No, he didn't get the school name location wrong. He actually thought his kid went to this school. In our area we see a lot of parents who don't give a crap. But this guy was something else. Sorry for the bad formatting. Posting from phone. I'm white, and I teach at a predominantly black and Hispanic school in a lower income area. I had a black student who would basically sprawl on his desk every day and refuse to do work. Mum was shopping for excuses to get him special treatment because he was an athlete, and if there were things in his plan before he got to high school it would make high school easier. So mom accused me of being racist toward black people and setting unreasonable standards. I reached across my desk and showed her my wedding picture and my wife, who is black. Mom's response, well, she looks pretty light to me. I don't think she's really black. Mom's response, well, she looks pretty light to me. I don't think she's really black. That woman is a special kind of stupid. I teach at an after-school academy in South Korea, so I don't interact with the parents directly, but there are so many kids with behavior problems. Whenever I have the head teacher call parents, I always get the same response. The parent knows about the behavior and they can't control them either. My sister had someone who refused to speak with her because she was cross-dressing due to the fact that she was wearing pants, and that was a sign she wasn't Christian enough. Not a teacher, but my parents were pretty awful to my teachers. Throughout grade school, I noticed that my parents always said disparaging things about teachers I liked and praised teachers I hated. So by junior high, I would flip the roles. If I liked a teacher, I always claimed I hated them. And if I disliked a teacher, I made up crap about how inspirational they were and how I loved them. Have you ever had that point in your life when you were really right about something and you were disappointed instead of overjoyed that you were right? Yep, it wasn't 100% foolproof. There were some teachers that I liked in the beginning of the year that I ended up not liking at the end of the year, and vice versa. Sometimes teachers would come up to me in annoyance and ask why my dad was so mean to them. My dad is a sociopath and considers himself far more intelligent than anyone he is in front of, and he makes them know it. Eventually social services got involved, and that changed everything. Now the teachers had a note in my file that things at home were not good, which pretty much disconnected my parents from being taken seriously. After that happened, I had a lot of teachers that were very valuable allies in getting through my life. Some taught me a lot of valuable lessons that I still use to this day. I am extremely grateful for all of the teachers that I met that helped me along. It's nice to hear of bureaucratic systems actually working as they're supposed to. Congrats to you for picking up what they were laying down. Second grader, really bright, funny, and interesting kid, also very wiggly and a little overconfident. He had a really hard time taking constructive feedback on anything. He would get super offended and sometimes really upset if I gave him a suggestion to add to his writing, etc. He also didn't really follow directions and had to be the center of attention a lot of the time, which was distracting with 26 other kids in the class. Because he couldn't take suggestions, he wasn't making as much progress as he should have been. Mom came to the conference and talked for 15+ minutes about how her son's a genius and she tells him that every day, etc, etc. This is textbook fixed mindset stuff and explained perfectly why he can't handle feedback at all. It was fascinating but really frustrating, because she's so clearly holding him back but she doesn't respect teachers much, so there's no way for someone to tell her that. Also, her kid isn't a genius like I have had a handful of those, and he is just not one of them, but he is still awesome, and important, and special and wonderful. It was just weird to see how much she insisted that he must be the smartest kid in the room. I feel like calling kids geniuses is bad for them. You can have all the natural intelligence in the world, but if you don't understand the value of hard work, you still won't go anywhere in life. My district is actually about 90% full of decent parents. Parents who want their kids to do well, but correctly, like parents who, if the kid is failing, ask what the kid can do to bring their own grade up, make up missing homework, extra credit. They want to know how they can help. The worst I get, usually, is wishy-washy parents, and my student must go to Ivy League parents. When I call a wishy-washy parent and say, yeah, it's a third of the way through the quarter and your kid hasn't done any homework, here's my website where the kid can download all the missing homeworks and turn them in for partial credit, the parent says, well, I'll try to get him to do that. At that point, I wash my hands of this homework being done. I've done my job, covered my butt with regards to contacting the parent. I'll contact them again towards the end of the quarter saying, yeah, kid's gonna fail if the homework isn't done, and wash my hands again. I had one mom ask about grades. Her honors student was pulling a 96 in my class. Excellent. She asked what he should be doing to get a higher grade. I'm literally dumbfounded at this point. I have to tell her, nothing, really. This is English, not math. Things are rarely 100% correct and there is always room for improvement in writing. I tell her to have him work on cutting the fat out of his writing and I'd help him if he wanted. But a 96 is excellent in my class, especially in honors where I'm a tough grader. Yeah, my student must go to Ivy League parents, and similarly, in high school, those kinds of students are prats. I have had to deal with physically aggressive parents on more than one occasion. The worst was a dad who almost out of control because we had confiscated a knife and called him in about it. I teach at a small high school in a village in England. I am rather tall, 6'5". A couple of parents went to the principal to complain that I am unapproachable and intimidating despite the fact that I smile constantly and am very friendly. Ended with a meeting with myself, the parents and the assistant principal to talk about how I could be less intimidating and more welcoming to parents. I didn't return to that school the next year. The answer is obvious. Cut your legs off at the knee. Had a senior in drafting class. Didn't work. Refused to stay awake through class. No effort whatsoever. Needed the class to graduate. First 9 weeks progress reports are sent home, and I magnanimous gave him a 68 so that he would have a chance to pass for the semester. Cue his screeching hag of a mother spending an hour verbally abusing me. Documentation? Check. Copies of correspondence? Check. Didn't matter. It was my fault he wasn't allowed to take his driving test due to failing a class. That she had spent a lot of money on his car and now he wouldn't get the chance to drive it. This went on with the guidance counselor's blessing until I finally had enough. I explained my reasoning for his grade and giving him a chance to get turned around and be able to pass for the semester. I apologized for giving him a 68 and asked if she would rather have what he earned put on his report card. She replied yes. So I looked to the guidance counselor and told him I wished to change the grade to a 28 and showed my gradebook to prove that he had indeed earned that grade. She immediately started backpedaling and accusing me of picking on her son. I stood up, looked at her, and said you have a choice. The 28 he earned, or the 68 I gave him. Have him let me know tomorrow. I am late for class. I walked out of the meeting. They chose the 68. He was a model student after that. That must have felt sweet. There are a lot of examples of parents that don't make their kids take responsibility for their own actions. But my worst experience is from a family member. I teach grade 1 and by the time kids come to me, they are often established in their reading help club, speech therapy, occupational therapy, counseling, etc. But it is still my job to make sure that if a kid needs help that they get it. I was visiting my aunt and spending a lot of time with my young cousin. She has a very obvious speech impediment that needs a lot of attention. I asked my aunt how's she doing in speech therapy and was met with silence and anger. Apparently, she refused to acknowledge that her daughter had an issue. I asked if she had ever talked to her teacher about it and my aunt replied her teacher doesn't know what she's talking about. So, my cousin will go on without being able to say her sister's name properly and will have considerable difficulty with spelling and reading because she can't actually pronounce the sounds properly. My mother, a teacher, had this parent whose kid was about 13 years old and has severe and treated ADHD. The mother explained that she just had too many things going on in her life to worry about her own son and that he needed to learn there were consequences for his actions. This kid has a medical disease and she's literally ignoring him because she had better things to do. The parent that expects the school to raise their child. Not her fault. She has better things to do. My first year of teaching. First parent-teacher conference. First night ever meeting students' parents and I almost got into a fist fight to defend myself. I had taken a temporary pay teaching contract in a teeny tiny town in Saskatchewan a day before the school year started. Unbeknownst to me, the guy I was covering for only had 2 lessons in his lesson plan: dodgeball and floor hockey. Come PTI night, an upset parent showed up to the interviews angry that their son had an 8% in pay. I'd asked my principal to join me during this interview and he pulled up a chair beside the angry dad. For the next 90 minutes, I calmly and politely tried to explain the reasoning behind my unit plans, backed up my grading and my lesson planning with curricular objectives and ministry initiatives. I crossed every I and dotted every T while they, literally, were yelling and screaming at me across the table. It culminated with a 250+ pound father standing over my table with my face less than 2 feet from mine and waving his finger less than 2 inches away from my nose while yelling that I was an arrogant prick that needed to be taught a lesson in humility from someone older and wiser. My administrator did nothing. I've bartended, bounced, and I train in martial arts. That was the most like a potential self-defense situation that I've ever been in. I got an adrenaline dump after the interaction worse than my first boxing fight. That's how close to a fist fight I thought this situation got to. Can you explain how the kid failed pay? All the pay classes I've taken would just show up for a B and be dressed for an A. My wife is a 2nd and 3rd grade teacher. She had her purse stolen by one of her kids' parents. She left the conference midway through the meeting to grab some printouts, test scores, for the dad. When she returned he was gone. She didn't realize until about 30 minutes past that her purse was gone. Also, I teach 7/8 choir, but was asked to sub for 1 hour of 6th phys ed. They were crazy, but whatever. Until at the end, one kid messes up a VB hit. and a girl yells across the gym that he's a homo. I pull her aside and tell her that's not okay. She claims she didn't say anything. I write her up. She scribbles it out and starts fighting with me. I bring her to the office and try to forget about it, even though I'm fuming mad. Well, her mother, who is the secretary for another school in our district, calls me later and chews me out, saying her daughter said hobo instead of homo. Insert eye roll. Okay, sure. She still shouldn't have yelled anything at another student. Yes, I'm sure she said homo. Yes, it was loud. No, I didn't escalate the situation. Your daughter did, etc. Left the phone call nearly in tears as my next class is walking in. Turns out she also called me principal to tell her I sounded young and inexperienced. 26. Fourth year teacher, and that she stands by her daughter saying hobo. The principal also rolled her eyes, but it's just frustrating. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.